While having already received national acclaim for her children's radio productions, Enniscorthy-based Karen Tomkins has now been shortlisted for a prize at the International 2022 New York Festival's Radio Awards. Karen's a finalist in the Best Children Young Adult Programme category for her series Big Breakfast Little Stories, which aired here on WLRfm in 2020 and 2021. The Radio Awards received entries from radio stations, networks and independent producers from over 30 countries around the globe. And Karen's on the line for a chat now. So congratulations, Karen. That's great news. Tell us all about this New York Festival's Radio Awards, first of all. You must be thrilled.
I am. Thanks a million, Geoff. I'm delighted. So it's the New York Festival Awards is it's radio stations from all across the world are entered into these awards. So you're kind of showcased against, like, there's loads of, they're kind of the national stations and the corporations in Australia and New Zealand, and the BBC is up there, and RT. Yeah, because I even saw Bloomberg and Sky and CBS. So you feel, oh my God, WLR is among them now, which is brilliant as well. So I'm kind of delighted about that.
There was great feedback, Karen, though. I mean, it was on the Big Breakfast Little Stories spot there on the Blah on WLR. What was it, 2020 and 21? And it went down and bombed, didn't it? I mean, you very kindly even did my little grandchild Grace, and they're a treasure to have them when they grow older too.
They are, and yeah, it was during lockdown, and I think we all changed a little bit, Geoff. Well, everyone changed. Our lives changed literally overnight on the 13th of March 2020.
Yeah.
And I just had this idea, I have 3 kids, and my little one Daisy is 5 and Harry's 11 and Jack's a teenager now. But I mean, he loved when I used to read stories for him as well.
Yeah.
But my kids just love when I make up stories. And they just think they're a great laugh, so they'd be like, Mommy, no, don't read a story, make one up. So I'll make up mad stories, but I'll include people that they know. So it could be the neighbours, and they'll get a great laugh out of including characters that they're familiar with. And God, if the neighbours ever found out the stuff I say about them in the stories. But so they loved that. And I just kind of had this kind of moment in that early lockdown. And I thought, there's children now and they're homeschooling and their life has been absolutely upended. Yeah. Wouldn't it be lovely? And radio was really serving, especially local radio, was serving people at that time. And I thought, how can local radio serve children? How can it serve them in a way that doesn't frighten them, but, maybe helps them a little bit? So I just had this idea, why don't I make up stories like the ones I do for my own children that include people that they know and places that they're familiar with, and make it kind of funny and make them the star of it, and, give them for 5 minutes every Friday morning, give them that platform that they're the absolute star of this story and that this is their story on WLR. So I went to Michael Byrne and to Des Whelan, and in fairness, it was a very difficult idea to actually put in words. When you have something in your head and you're going, oh, I have this great idea. And I was trying to, as best as I could, kind of tell them, look, I think this might work. And to be fair to them, they didn't flinch and say, Karen, okay, what? They actually really took it seriously and said, yeah, that could really work. So we went about, and it was Ollie and Mary were on the Big Breakfast Blah at the time, and opened it up to listeners and said, look, this is going to happen. If you have kids who, might like to be featured in a story, get in touch with us. And that was it, Geoff. We were bombarded in a good way with parents getting in touch saying, my child has missed out on their birthday. They're really upset. They've just got a health diagnosis, one child, and, we're so isolated. This would be a lovely thing. So there was so many different things going on in the children's lives.
Yeah.
And then to be able to kind of give them a story. I know it didn't solve anything for them, but it just helped, I think, a little bit.
It did. And are they, by the way, accessible now, or have you got them stored anywhere? Yeah.
They're still actually on the WLR site.
Very good.
If you go onto the WLRfm website, you will find a link there. I'm trying to find it. It's a listen back link anyway, that you can still access. And there's the first series, I think there was 10 or 12 stories as well, and the second series of 12 stories. So they're all up there, so you can click on them and listen back to all of them. Yeah.
They're a lovely thing to have. Now, moving on, well, from that, let's finish off there first of all. But New York, the Festival of Radio Awards, it's a big deal, isn't it, as you were saying? When does it happen, and how will you know what's going on? Is it very soon?
It's on the 26th of April, so that's when the actual awards are going to be announced. So they do like gold, silver, and bronze. I think they've like 14 categories, so they've loads of different ones to get through.
Mm.
At the minute, Jeff, I actually don't know what way it works. So I think because it's New York, it's virtual anyway. I know that much. I think they had looked at maybe hosting it in Las Vegas.
Wow.
And everyone was asking me, "Oh, are you going to be going to Vegas?" I'd be lucky to get down to my local pub or the supermarket. It's as much of a trip
Yeah.
as I manage these days with 3 kids. So no, that was never going to happen. So I'm kind of glad it's virtual. I don't feel I'm missing out on anything. Um, but I think because it's obviously the different time zone, it might be like, the way you have to
5
stay up
hours.
late at night
Yeah.
for the Oscars or something. So it could be a case of all sitting around the telly with this live stream on at midnight,
Yeah.
waiting to hear the results of it. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. Let us know as soon as you find out, will you?
Oh, I will. I'll be waking you up during the night. If there's any news at all, you'll be going, "Who's ringing me at this hour of the night?"
Well, you have your
And I
IMRO
have to mention,
you have your IMRO in the back pocket anyway. So far from that.
yeah, my kids are laughing at me now, and my family were sending on these memes of James Bond. The world is not enough, And, and I said, but like the Imbros were great and WLR did so well at them. But look at sometimes you just think it was just really unique, and I think I just absolutely loved doing it so much. And like the feedback from the kids and the families I did it for was really strong as well. So I
Yeah.
just thought nobody else is doing this. So maybe you're like it's worth putting out there and seeing how it goes. And I have to mention when I'm talking to you, Jeff, you and Timmy Ryan and John O'Shea and Mary and Ollie and Aveen and Aoife Kearns in the news, I roped you all in like to do voiceovers
Oh,
for
that's
me
right.
during
Yeah.
the stories as
Yeah.
well at different times. So I have to give credit to you, and you did great acting for me. And I think you were, what's that word when you're in character, you play yourself in a role, but you did a great job,
Acting the
Jeff.
ages.
So
But have you plans to do more of those, Karen?
yeah, so like I do a lot of kind of still children's work elsewhere, and yeah, we are looking at kind of maybe seeing what we can do with WLR, and looking into the future and seeing what we could do. And I'd love to, because like there's always going to be different children. Like the children that were featured 2 years ago are gone a little bit older. It mightn't be for them anymore, but there's always newer little ones coming on stream, and they're listeners as well, and it's great to serve them. So I'd love to to look at something in the future. I think it'd be brilliant fun to go again at it.
Oh, yeah, they're lovely to listen to. Well, they're on the WLR website, as you were saying. Now, moving on to your current project, which is called the Treasure Vox. And I even have some clips here. Tell us a little bit about this.
So, a quick bit of background. My nanny just was a fabulous woman, and her 80th birthday, it was 11 years ago. I mean, there was 35 grandchildren, 35 great grandchildren in her family. What do you get your grandmother who's 80 when there's that many in the family?
Yeah.
So I decided to sit down and record her life story. I said, Nanny, like, you have some just amazing stories. Do you know the resilience of women of that generation, and all the things she would have done? So I did. I sat down, I made a documentary about her for her birthday. And it was always something I had in the back of my mind, Jeff, that everybody has a story in them. And everybody is worthy of having a documentary of their own. And so I started this business where I record people's life stories with them and turn that into like a documentary you'd hear on radio, but it's really only for family. And it's just to kind of capture the stories, the stories that pass down through generations and families,
Yeah.
and to capture their voices. So I treat it as though it's a radio project, but it's just for family. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
It's a great idea. It's brilliant. I remember my granny, and I remember saying to her, she's no longer with us, my Granny Bowers, and I said, do you remember when the Titanic sank, Granny? And she said, yeah. I said, how did you find out?
Wow.
The newspaper. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's how far we've come with technology. Like those kind of stories. And of course, I was thinking afterwards, like you've done this now. I was thinking, well, that would have been a fabulous thing to be able to do. Anyway, I have some clips here. You've a couple of them here. One is about the old ferry in Passage East. Give us a little intro on this.
So, and sometimes people say to me, oh God, I don't have an awful lot to say, I don't have this big kind of historical past, and you don't always need it. Like sometimes recording these stories is just about what was life like back then. And this is an example of that. So this lovely man that I recorded with, he was working on the rural electrification scheme at the time. So he's from Waterford, but he used to have to travel. They'd go in gangs to different parts of the country, putting in the poles, literally digging to put the poles in the ground. So at weekends, everyone had bikes, so he'd cycle. And he was based in Wexford at the time working, and at weekends he'd have to get himself back to see his family and his then girlfriend in Waterford. And he said he'd cycle up to Ballyhack. And of course, me and my innocence said, "Oh, and you got the ferry across." And he said, "Well, it wasn't quite the ferry." And the description he gave me makes you realise, not that long ago, things were very, very different. So this is him talking about what was the ferry crossing from Ballyhack to Passage back in the day.
Before Derek Donnelly put the fabulous boat there, here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the weekends then, next I'd be, of course, thinking about Eileen. And I'd get up on my bicycle and cycle up to Waterford. We worked them days, we worked in a half day on a Saturday. Got on a bicycle and came up the new line up as far as Ballyhack, where a man by the name of John Barron, he used to run an old motorboat, that's what it was. It wasn't anything like what it is today, of course. This was only a fishing boat, really, that he used to go over and back, bringing passengers over and back. When you come to Ballyhack, you'd pull up a white flag on a pole, and he'd see the white flag, he'd come across, he'd know there'd be a customer, and he'd come over in the boat. That's right. And the boat, of a wild day now, a kind of windy day now, the waves would be going up and down, do you see? When you'd be going to get into the boat would be down about 10 feet down one, and the next thing to come up. And you'd have to judge your time then. First of all, you'd have to throw in the bicycle when they come up. And then you have to wait for the boat to come back up again. Then you jump in. And the same time when you come over the Passage. When the boat will rise up level with it, you threw off the bicycle. And then you waited for the boat to come off again. When it came up the second time, you jumped off.
God, that's fabulous, Karen, altogether. It really is. Is it difficult to draw people out, or are they full of stories straight away? Do you have to kind of warm them up a little bit?
Yeah, so I'd always call them beforehand to do, like a kind of a background questionnaire and a little bit of research for myself, so I'll know where to kind of direct my line of questions. Yeah. And sometimes if it's an elderly person, then the family will tell me, look, he'd like to talk about this or ask him about this. So I'd always have my cues beforehand. Yeah. But honest to God, in all the people that I've interviewed, like there's always that nerves. It's like the night before the leaving cert. Sometimes when I arrive at people's houses, they're going, "Oh my God, what are you going to ask me?"
Yeah.
But then when they get chatting, it is just a chat, and you just let people talk and get the best bits of exactly like what you heard there. And when, I don't know, Geoff, when people just start talking, they really open up, and I lose track of time. I get so engrossed in what they're talking about, and I think they do too. They're always surprised, going, "God, we were 3 hours."
That time flew, yeah.
Yeah, you go back in your mind, yeah.
You have another one here. We've 3 of them here. Marriage description. Give us a little intro on this one.
So this was a lovely lady, and she's 94, and she was kind of saying, "I don't know what I'm going to tell you. Again, I didn't do anything kind of spectacular." And I said, "But you reared so many children." She had like many women back then, there was families of 10 and 12 children working on a farm, and really, really working hard. And one thing she said was, obviously, like, dance halls were a huge thing. Anyone who I ask how you met your husband or wife back then, it was always the dance halls. So it was lovely. She was talking about, how she met her husband and going to the dance halls on your bike and putting your dress out over the seat of the bike so it wouldn't get destroyed. Yeah. And, the simplicity of life. But I just thought she gave me this lovely description of marriage, because marriage was a big thing to so many young girls, particularly. You were to get married, and that was it. And she just gave this gorgeous description of, I suppose, a time when life was just that bit simpler and less complicated. And it's just her talking about what marriage meant back then.
Okay, here it is.
And he came up and sat down beside me, and he says, "To the dance in the hall Sunday night, will you come?" And I said yes. And the rest is history. You went on a bit of a honeymoon if you had money. And you went home and you said to yourself, "Well, this is my kitchen. This is my very own. Nobody else owns anything. I own everything here." And you started from there, and off you went.
Isn't that lovely? Marriage description there from another lady. Did you?
Yeah, and it's at a time where like you didn't live together beforehand. So when you
Yeah.
got back, if you were lucky, like she said, to have a honeymoon, and that's only if you were lucky. When you got back, you moved in across the threshold for the very first time. And, you can imagine lots of young girls looking around, probably into, I think this was the husband's farm, it was in the family. You might have lived with your mother-in-law and other family members, and this became yours then, and you set off on your life journey together from there. I just thought it was a lovely way of putting it.
Yeah, and she felt that was a great achievement, and she was very happy in herself
Yes.
that that's where she'd arrived.
Yeah.
We've one
Yeah.
other one here, Karen. It's a quite exciting one. German planes bombing Manchester.
Yeah, so like I would go a lot at the time and meet people face to face. But obviously with COVID, Geoff, and it isn't always possible at distance and everything. So this one I recorded with a gentleman in his 90s in the UK. His family live here in Ireland, but they couldn't get across to see him, but they wanted him to talk about his past.
Yeah.
So this man grew up in Manchester, and he was only very young. When the Blitz was happening across England. But he said that he remembered that sound of the German planes kind of triggered memories for him when he was older. He could remember going back to that place where he lived, being in his pram and kind of seeing them going across the sky, which, is it just the way the mind works even as we get older? Sometimes the long-term memory and those triggers are so strong. And it was lovely. Like I was only talking to him over Zoom, but it was lovely to kind of capture that with him as well.
Okay, let's have a listen to that.
Another of the most familiar sights in the country, Nazi planes crashed and broken. Hitler's morning strafe.
I was actually born halfway through the Battle of Britain, and of course that was well known as an RAF exercise to try and repel the Luftwaffe, which was bombing all the major cities, including Manchester, where I was born. I was told later that there was serious damage to the houses that we were in at the time. One night, about 3 weeks after I was born, the German bombers came over, missed the railway line completely, and dropped a stick of bombs in the park. So every window in the road was just blown out. And as we were renting the house, we had to move out, basically.
Incredibly, there's a subconscious memory of being in his pram and hearing overhead German aircraft.
I think I remember that quite well. I think it was a sound that had gone into my head. I was aware later when I heard recordings of the bombers, the German aircraft. I could remember later the sound, and I'm fairly sure that was it. So,
fascinating, isn't it? All the stuff that people remember, Karen, when they get older.
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually that was Manchester. But Geoff, I was talking to a lady, and I never, by the way, all these clips that you're hearing are with permission of the people because it's obviously so private. But I was talking to one lady, and she said there were actually a lot of those foreign aircraft over Waterford back at the time of World War II as well. And she remembers one that crashed in Ballybeg, kind of on out the Cork Road area in 1943. So I did a bit of research on it, and seemingly there were a good few of them, but it was an RAF plane that had to make an emergency landing. But seemingly a load of people from Waterford, like children and hundreds of people, went down obviously to kind of, see this plane and take away souvenirs, and they were making rings out of some of the metal souvenirs that they got off the plane. And I'm sure there's people out there, that still would have maybe a parent or grandparent who remembers being there. And then there was others like Tramore and Kilmac. There was loads of those around at the time as well. So, again, just a part of history that you wouldn't read about in a history book, but means something to families.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe there was another German plane dumped its load of bombs over in Campile. I believe there was life lost and everything over there. Do you remember that, or did you hear about that?
There actually, and I interviewed a lady only a few weeks ago, 99, this lady, and she was in her back garden and looked up in the sky. She said she heard the sound of a plane, and it wasn't really uncommon. She said they had to sleep at night. You turned off all the lights in the house once it got dark because there was just that fear of the planes going over. And she looked up, she said, into the sky, and she could see the German sign, and it was so low in the sky. And she was in Campile, and she didn't really put much past on it and kind of went back about her day. She was a teenager at the time, and it was only the next day, that was a Saturday, and the next day the word had kind of spread that the creamery in Campile had been bombed, and that was the plane. And she said it was so close to her, she could see it. And that was the plane that bombed the co-op, the creamery, and 3 people were killed in it. Yeah,
that's right. So the Treasure Vox is the project at the moment, and if people are interested maybe in having a member of their family recorded, what do they do, Karen?
Yep, I'm building a website, Geoff, and it should be launched, I'm hoping, in the next week or two. If anyone's ever built their own small business website, it's a bit of a job. But at the moment, I'm on Facebook. So if you put in the Treasure Vox, and that's V for, voice, Karen Tomkins, the Treasure Vox, you'll find me on Facebook there. And there's loads of other kind of audio samples and stuff if people want to have a listen to them and just read a little bit more about what it is.
Brilliant. Fair play to you. So Karen's up for those awards next week, the 2022 New York Festival Radio Awards, for her recordings of stories for little kids. And you can get those on the WR site. And the Treasure Vox is, the website should be up soon, but have a look on Facebook. Karen, thanks a million. It's lovely talking to you about that, and the very best of luck with the awards.
Thanks a million, Geoff. Really, thanks a million. I'll be keeping an ear out for the phone now in the middle of the night on the 26th of April if there's good news.
Oh, mad to hear the news. Thanks, Karen.
All right, thanks, Geoff. Bye.